Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the second of our African American caucus of the Mecklenburg County Democratic Party School Board Forums. My name is Braxton B. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to. Sorry about that. We're going to try that again. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the second of our African American caucus of the Mecklenburg County Democratic Party School Board Forums. My name is Braxton B. Coates, and I have the pleasure of serving as the president of the African American caucus. On behalf of the African American caucus, I would like to again welcome you, both our candidates and members of the general public, as well as our membership, to this evening's forum. And would like to go ahead and turn it over to our moderator, Mr. Dedrick Russell of Gray Television, for his remarks and forum procedures before we kick it off with our District 4 forum.
Thank you, President Bicos, and good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining this forum with our candidates, with our school board. Before we get started, I want to lay down the rules of engagement so everybody will be on the same page. We're going to start with District 4. The candidates will have opening statements, 2 minutes. Then we'll have a question and answer, and candidates will have 1 minute to respond to all questions. 1 minute to respond to all questions. Now, each candidate will receive one rebuttal for your particular forum. We define a rebuttal can be used when your name is mentioned or when unfactual information is presented. The definition we're using tonight for a rebuttal is that when your name is mentioned and or unfactual information is presented, you can use your rebuttal, and candidates will have 1 minute for their rebuttal. After our question and answer period, candidates will have 90 seconds to deliver a closing statement. Candidates will have 90 seconds to deliver a closing statement. We have questions, and if you have a question, you can, you know what to do, so we can get those questions to me, and we will ask those questions of the candidates. Okay? Well, as they say, let's get the show started. We're going to start with District 4. District 4. For District 4, we have Carol Sawyer. We have Clara Kennedy Witherspoon, and we have Stephanie Sneed. We're going to start your 2 minute opening statements right now, and we're going to start with Carol Sawyer. Good evening, Ms. Sawyer.
Good evening. I'm Carol Sawyer, and I serve as the District 4 representative on the CMS Board of Education. And I'm running for a second term, and I ask for your support. When I was about 10, I went to school board meetings with my mom. Back then, my school district charged textbook rental fees. My mom fought those fees because she saw families struggling to pay and the shame they felt when they couldn't. I learned from my mom the power of advocacy and the importance of equity. My election to the school board in 2017 seems like a lifetime ago. In those pre-COVID days, I successfully championed a new equity policy. I spent months drafting that policy in collaboration with education advocates, the BPC and the BPC Education Committee, and others. I worked to reestablish a community equity committee. Establishing that committee was difficult. Several board members opposed its creation. But I persisted because I was committed to having community members engaging with the board in our equity work. The board has already changed some of our policies because of that committee's work. As a child, I learned that policy had the power to change lives. Now, as policy committee chair, I'm working with my colleagues to ensure that CMS reflects the values of our community. This is important work that will make our system stronger, more accountable, and more equitable. I would be honored to continue to serve as your district representative, and I ask for your vote on November 8th. Thank you. Carol Sawyer for School Board.
Thank you, Ms. Sawyer. We will now have Ms. Clara Kennedy Witherspoon. Good evening, Ms. Witherspoon.
Good evening, and thank you for hosting this event. My name is Clara Kennedy Witherspoon. I am also running for District 4. I am running because I believe in our education system. I just think we need some change. I grew up in Charlotte-Mecklenburg, in Charlotte. I went through the Charlotte-Mecklenburg school system during a time when it was integration, busing, segregated schools, integration, and busing. But I also, I am a firm believer that public education is huge and we just need to get it right. I have worked in Charlotte-Mecklenburg school system. I retired January of this year as a multi-tier system of support specialist, as well as a licensed school counselor. And in that role, what I did, I supported schools and looking at their school data to identify what needed to be changed. And it is really the best practice in turning our low-performing schools around. I have worked in my community most of my adult life. I've worked as a social worker for Head Start. I've been an after-school site coordinator for CMS. I've been an instructional assistant. I've worked on PTAs. I've worked as vice president of PTA. I have just been really involved in education. And so for me, this gives me another opportunity to give back to my community. So please consider voting for Clara Kennedy Witherspoon for School Board Member District 4.
Thank you, Ms. Witherspoon. And we will now have opening remarks given by Ms. Stephanie Sneed. Good evening, Ms. Sneed.
Good evening. My name is Stephanie Sneed, and I'm a candidate for Board of Education District 4. I will start today just as I start every time I address the Board of Education. We are in a state of emergency in Charlotte, and the number one issue that people are not paying attention to is the state of our education system, and particularly how it's affecting those that look just like me and many of you. The number of low-performing schools has increased from 42 to 50, and more than about 70% of Black third graders are not proficient in reading. It's time for a fresh perspective from a proven and trusted leader that is connected to the community that it serves. I am an employment attorney, a former trial attorney for Child Protective Services. I serve on the CMS Bond Oversight Committee. I'm a CMS volunteer, a PTA member. I'm a founding member of an education think tank. I am the immediate past chair of the Black Political Caucus. But the most important role that I have that is relevant is that I am a CMS parent. I'm a CMS parent of a child who just completed third grade this past year, the target areas that we're talking about, and I am a parent of a child that was in a low-performing school. I want something different and extraordinary for all of our students, and that will be through a focus on student achievement, support for our teachers and staff, access to mental health care for students and families, accountability and transparency in collaboration with intergovernmental agencies, community partners, parents, students, and the corporate community. It is time for a fresh perspective on school board. My name is Stephanie Sneed. I'm your candidate for District 4 School Board.
All right, and thank you, Ms. Sneed. Again, we'll start the Q&A. You have 60 seconds, a minute to answer, and we do have a timekeeper. And if the timekeeper says time, then please complete your thought and so we can move on. Okay, let's get right to it. When you get to Black students here in CMS, Black students, 36.6% proficient, 20.7% college and career ready. Latino students, 36.6% proficient, 21.9% college and career ready. We have several schools in CMS who are ranked D or F. As school board member, tell me, what's your big idea to turn this around? What's your big idea to close this achievement gap? We're going to start with Ms. Witherspoon.
All right. Well, I hugely believe in a framework that the district is currently utilizing. Well, it's not just the district, it's all across the state of North Carolina, which is the MTSS process. And often people get that confused. What it simply is using a system to look at how schools are operated, which is you look at the school data. The school data tells you whether or not a school is serving students and serving students well. So what you do, you look at that school data and you begin to analyze what the issues are. And if you look at the data, it will tell you, and CMS has that data that you can look at. And if schools really use that data the way it should be, we can turn our low performing schools around. Let me talk about a little bit about MTSS. What that is those are interventions. You got tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And a tier 1 intervention, what you really have is everything that's happening in the school to serve students. And I know everybody probably either maybe have children or, my time's up.
Thank you. Ms. Sneed, what's your big idea to close this achievement gap?
Well, the first thing is that there has to be a board focus on student achievement and outcomes. I've addressed the school board many times about the lack of focus on this that is particularly geared towards equity and closing these achievement gaps. So when I say it's a top-down approach, then it has to start with the board, with the selection of the superintendent, administration, that goes down to the teachers. The other thing is, so it's very important for the board to get this right and for the board to select the correct superintendent. And also, I have to say one of the most important things is that there has to be a shift in processes and administration and culture change that is efficient for the students, that is geared toward an environment that will close the achievement gap. I think oftentimes that we have a deficit approach in regards to students that are low income and of color. That has to change. That approach starts from the top. And when I say deficit, it means that they are a detriment as opposed to an asset that can be turned around.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Sawyer, what's your big idea to close this achievement gap?
Thank you. The board has adopted goals and is monitoring progress to those goals, and third grade reading is one of them, with a laser-like focus. At our last meeting, we did a deep dive into the third grade reading level data, and we learned about the strategies that the system is employing to raise achievement among Black and Brown students. Those include additional multi-tiered systems of support, as Ms. Witherspoon said, but it also includes building a culture in the school of high expectations for the teachers and high expectations for the students. We have schools that are succeeding in making progress, even in this very difficult last year, and they employed targeted strategies to work with students in small groups, to bring in extra facilitators to help with tutoring and interventions. Thank you.
Thank you. In an article from WFAE that was cited about board chair Elise Dashiu. Now, the board's goal, when we're talking about third grade reading, the board's goal is to hit 36% this year for third graders and 50% by 2024. In the article, Elise Dashiu quotes says, they will achieve at a higher level than even before the pandemic if we as a board do our job well. And if we don't do our job well, our students will receive an education that is less than what they deserve. So my question to you is, should board members have another opportunity to serve if they can't get the job done, if they don't reach this goal, third graders by 50% 2024? Let's start with Ms. Sneed.
Well, I would think that, I think that's why we're here, is that no, we're beyond another chance. It is not lost on me that we are just now this year and the past year that board members are saying now we have a focus on student governance and student achievement and outcomes. That conversation should have been happening even before the pandemic. And I will say that if we don't have again an attention to these children that have these achievement gaps, then we won't move forward. The board is focusing on third grade readers right now that are going to be in the third grade now, but what about all those that have already passed the third grade? Because we know that there are children that are in upper grades that are not proficient in reading. So they're not teaching reading in high school or junior high school. So what is the plan for moving those kids that are beyond third grade now?
Sure. Thank you. Ms. Sawyer, if the goal is not reached with third graders, 50% by 2024, the board chair said that if the board does its job well, it can happen, but if they do not, then the kids are getting less than what they deserve. Do you think that the board members should continue if the goal is not reached?
Well, the mantra that the board has, as we've adopted our student outcomes focused governance work, is that student outcomes won't change until adult behaviors change. And that change has started with the board. That change is moving through the entire staff. Our budgeting process was built on meeting those goals. And I'm confident that we will get there, especially if we have the supports we need from the community. We need our community to help us get kids to school on time, to help us encourage families to have their students in school every day. We have a problem with student attendance, and in third grade, that's not the child's fault. That's a family problem that needs to be addressed community-wide. So I have confidence that we will make those goals and that the focus that we have will get us there.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Sawyer. Ms. Witherspoon, what do you say if the goal is not reached? What should happen to the board members?
Well, I have to talk about the goals first. When I think about the goals and the guardrails that the board has set for this year, I don't think it's absolutely impossible for that goal to be met, but here's the problem I have with it. The problem that I have with it is that we're focusing on students with level 4s and level 5s. And we're forgetting about those students who have level 1s and level 2s, which is the huge issue. Those are the students that are not proficient. And so if we don't look at those students, I don't think we're really addressing the needs of all of our students. You know, when you talk about third, fourth, level 4s and level 5, those students are pretty on the trajectory of proficient or above. But your 1s and your 2s is who we got to think about. Those are the students that are not achieving, who are not proficient, who are not reading on grade level. And as the data says and research, if a student is not reading by third grade, he's 4 times more likely to drop out of school. So we have to kind of look at those goals.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Sawyer, you have said another issue which CMS has some influence over is diversity of student staff at each school. And then also, you also say that you will advocate for greater emphasis on socioeconomic diversity in our pupil assignment framework. So do you think that students should go to other students or take a long bus ride to diversify the socioeconomic diversity in the pupil assignment framework, because that is the work of the board, the student assignment plan? So talk to me about what you mean by that. And the question is, do you think that how do you make a school diverse when it comes to socioeconomic status when people in one neighborhood are of one socioeconomic status? So talk to me about that, Ms. Sawyer.
Well, it will take community buy-in. Our magnet program already has sort of quotas for socioeconomic diversity. Our magnet programs have a priority for basically a third for low, medium, and high SES census blocks of the families that attend. So that is one way. Our full magnets have that tool in place. There are other tools we can use, and in many parts of District 4, our area is already economically diverse. It is getting less so, but it still has some very naturally diverse areas. But the schools don't reflect that natural diversity, and we need to find ways to support the schools that are not economically diverse to draw in the entire attendance zone. We have schools that have a lot of people who opt out. Shamrock Gardens is a good example.
Thank you. Ms. Witherspoon, socioeconomic status, diversity, academic success. Talk to me about when you're working on that student assignment plan. Do you think that students should be traveling all over to try to make force socioeconomic status diversity? Talk to me about that.
Well, I think that we've got to look at that. And I don't think that's a quick fix. I think that's something that a board would have to seriously think about to really address that issue, because I listened to what Carol just said earlier, but I really don't think that our schools are as diverse as we would think that they are, because they really are not. And throughout my canvassing communities, I'm running across families that are in areas that are in schools, in areas of schools that they have chose not to send their kids. And we're not just talking about, we're talking about families of color who are saying, no, I'm not sending my kids to a CMS school because it's a low performing school. And so we've got to do a better job of diversing. And even I know magnet schools were really not intended to be what they have become, but they're almost become for students who coming from families that are considered upper class or elite. That was never the purpose of magnet schools, but that is where they are in our district now. So I don't.
Thank you.
Sorry, my clock froze. I apologize.
That's okay. Ms. Sneed, what say you?
So obviously this is a complicated issue because Charlotte has a housing issue, right? Charlotte has a economically upward mobility issue, which can be traced back to education. So students don't receive a proper education, then they cannot be economically mobile. So I will say that to start with. The second thing is that children are, it is advantageous for children to have diverse socioeconomic status in their schools, but we have to be careful with that. That's not the end all be all. Just because it's a diverse body doesn't mean that all students are going to perform. I just want to give you an example. For example, I think we talk about Shamrock Gardens being a diverse socioeconomic school. 30% of the 8th graders are non-proficient Black compared to 20%. That's a diverse school. So still there are these inequities and gaps even in diverse schools. I know that that was the same school, that was the same thing that I experienced as well with my daughter. So that is not the specific, that's not the end all be all.
Okay, thank you. What are the specific top 3 issues facing your school district, and what are your plans, strategies, and proposals to address them? And can you be specific? The top 3 issues facing your school district, and what are your plans, strategies, proposals to address them if elected? We will start with Ms. Witherspoon.
Well, my top 3 is definitely equity and equality for our schools and resources for our students, schools, and our teachers. My next one would be accountability framework. And I'll come back and talk about that. And to ensuring that we're addressing the whole child. And I talk about social emotional needs, looking at the needs of the whole child. So when I talk about equity and equality, my first thing I think about is the money that's being held up in Raleigh through the Leandra Act. Because our low performing schools, when I said this before, we have parents on the higher end, on the south end, whose parents can push in a lot of money into PTAs and so on and so on. But on our other end, where parents are in other neighborhoods, our low performing schools, some of those parents are struggling to make ends meet, love to be involved with their PTA, love to show up in school, but they don't have that ability because they're trying to work and provide for their families. So we need equity and equality. We need equity as it pertains to resources in our school. My next one. Okay.
Thank you. Ms. Sneed, what are your top 3 priorities that you think the district faces?
So one is student achievement for all students, which that has to be an equitable effort. Again, as I explained, that starts with the board to the superintendent that goes down to the administration. The second thing is support for our teachers and staff, that they have the appropriate system, and that doesn't include just in the classroom, that includes an administrative system, that they have clear policies and guidance on that will change their work environment as well as the environment for the students. We have to provide a place for our teachers that they love coming to work, because we have to stop the hemorrhaging of teachers. The last thing is, you're making me pick 3, is kind of hard, but the last one I will say is accountability and transparency. And I'm saying that because One of the things that we know is that we have 37 policies, CMS, that deal with academics. We need to make sure those policies are being properly executed so that these tools that are in place can change work environments, student outcomes, change things for families.
All right, then. Thank you. Ms. Sawyer.
Thank you. Academic achievement is top of the list, and the board will be spending much of our board meeting time, every meeting, reviewing academic progress toward our academic goals. Our next meeting will be looking at the high school Math 1 scores. So we have a regular cadence of progress monitoring toward those goals. The second big issue is our superintendent search. And we need to work with our community to gather input, which is coming up, on what expectations our community members have for the superintendent, what qualities they're looking for, and then translate that into a superintendent profile. And then the next board will begin the superintendent search with a search firm, probably. The third priority is improving family engagement. And I don't just mean parents turning up at PTA meetings. There are lots of parents who are engaged in their child's education who can't come to meetings. But we need to find ways to support lots of different kinds of family engagement. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question comes from the audience. Do you feel that the North Carolina General Assembly should honor Appellate Court Judge Lee's 2020 order in the 28-year-long Leandro court case to fully fund North Carolina public schools? If so, what will you do as a CMS school board member to advocate for this outcome? What will you do to advocate for this outcome? We're going to start with Ms. Sneed.
So thank you for that question. Yes, actually, Leandro needs to be fully funded. Also, just as a little tidbit of information, a part of that remediation, what we need to look into as well is how how school performance is rated. Leandro has mentioned that as well, that those things need to be looked at. But advocating, one, yes, as a school board member, I will use my relationships with those in Raleigh. As a past chair of the Black Political Caucus, I've developed, quite a few relationships with our representatives in Raleigh. But I think one of the most important things is we have to educate the public on, one, it matters who you elect in Raleigh, and two, for them to help mobilize them in order for them to demand fully funding for the Leandro's decision. So those efforts, to put those into place to make sure individuals know what's happening. A lot of people don't even know that we are lacking funding because of Leandro decision. As a board member, I would definitely be committed to doing that because, I have routinely done that.
Thank you. Ms. Sawyer.
Thank you. Absolutely, Leandro should be fully funded. Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board of Education is a plaintiff in that case. We have a legal team that regularly has been filing briefs in support of the Leandro decision and to work through the courts in that process. Legislatively, it's difficult. Our Mecklenburg delegation is fully in line, but there's a lot of North Carolina that we need to work with. And I know there are coalitions of board members that are working in rural counties that are also working with their legislative delegations to encourage fully funding of Leandro.
Thank you. And Ms. Witherspoon.
Well, I think that it's important for the board to get involved with that because that is much needed money that needs to be funneled into our schools, our low performing schools, so that we can have more equity. So I think there's many ways we can reach out to our representatives. We can, if we have to get involved with rallies or whatever it needs to be to release that money, because that money will help balance that act for equity and equality for our kids, for our schools that don't have that additional funding, where families can't push that money in like other areas of our town.
Thank you. Next question. How can you, as a member of the Board of Education, establish policies? That's one thing that the board does, establish policies that will enhance, inform, and prepare our teachers and administrators to effectively interact and educate our Black students in a more culturally relevant manner? How can you as a board member establish policies that will enhance, inform, and prepare our teachers and administrators to effectively interact with and educate our Black students in a more culturally relevant manner? We're going to start with you, Ms. Sawyer.
Thank you. The board has policies that support multiculturalism and support using curriculum that is culturally responsive. Some people talk about CRT in CMS. CRT means culturally responsive teaching. So I have been a steadfast supporter of curriculum and reading materials in which students can see themselves in the materials, see themselves, see their cultural history, and see an honest history of this country. In terms of, and we have professional development to help our staff do that. One of the things that's really important is to increase the number of educators of color in our system. And one of the strategies that CMS is using to do that is to kind of grow our own. We are providing licensure training and preparation to staff within our schools.
Thank you.
Predominantly teachers of color or future teachers of color.
Ms. Witherspoon.
When I think about policy, a policy is as good as it is implemented. What do I mean by that? You can create policies, but if it's not enforced from the top all the way down into the school buildings, it's just what it is. It's just a policy. And that is something that I often saw and often heard. And when I talk about the framework that we need to implement and make sure it's happening inside these school buildings, it's not often enforced. I've worked in a building where it's enforced one place and another place isn't. The biggest thing we've got to do a better job with is accountability. Accountability for every single person that has a hand, input, and teaching our kids. So the biggest issue we've got, policies are good, but they got to be implemented and people have got to be held accountable.
Ms. Sneed.
So, yes, it does make sense. We have to have policies that are, implemented. There has to be a focus on it. The board has already adopted visions and policies to have, diverse education for our. Again, that's a matter of execution, but to know that it's working or not, I just want to add another aspect to this is that you have to have a connection to the community, like genuine connections to the community. If you don't have that, we don't know how well these systems or processes working. So I would like to add, in addition to what has already been mentioned, that we continue to have those connections with the communities, and that's the responsibility of the board members as well.
Gotcha. Thank you. One function of the school board is to hire a superintendent. We know what happened with the last superintendent. Talk to me about your analysis of how the board handled that. Give me your honest opinion on that. And do you think that, some people would say in the African-American community that maybe he was treated differently than other superintendents who were, I'll leave it at that. So talk to me about that and quickly, what do you think we need in that new superintendent? We're going to start with Ms. Witherspoon.
Glad you asked that question. Ask me first. Here's the problem I had with the issue with even letting our prior superintendent go. First of all, we knew that from the information heard that we knew that he did not meet all the qualifications. However, our board knew that. So my problem with this was that we should have come along beside him and supported him and having those check and balances. It may have looked like micromanagement, but if you already knew there were some shortcomings, you should have come alongside him and supported him to be successful. Now, what do I think our new superintendent should have? we should make sure that we have a superintendent that has all the requirements that we're looking for. Once we make that job description or whatever, we need to make sure that person has that. We need to make sure that person understands how to work with or have the experience working with a population such as Charlotte, a school district such as ours. We need to make sure he's a point leader. What is that? Someone who understands how to surround himself.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. Ms. Sneed.
So I will say is that the superintendent, there were some concerns about how the superintendent was handled. First of all, in order for there to be a good superintendent, the board has to have clear direction and clear standards for that superintendent. So in looking for the next superintendent, he has to be clearly qualified to deal with a system of our size and dealing with a diverse population and dealing with a system or an administration that is going through difficult times. They have to be a motivator. Not only do they have to be a motivator to the staff and be able to change cultures, processes, not afraid to do that. They have to be a motivator to the community. Oftentimes we hear, and we've heard superintendents, we've heard board members saying we have to have the community engaged in its process, but really, truly, are they connected to the community, and are they the conduit or the avenue that's going to be the motivator to the community to get them back invested into the system? They have to trust the superintendent.
Time.
Thank you, Ms. Sneed. Ms. Sawyer.
Thank you. Yes, I do want to have our robust community engagement about the vision and values that people want to express regarding our next superintendent. And that process will be starting in the next few days. But in terms of our future superintendent, I want someone who is a leader who can surround him or herself with strong individuals, because it is a huge, multifaceted job. It is not the job for a Lone Ranger. It is complex and has lots of different moving pieces. But I would also like to see a superintendent who allows decisions to be made at the lowest possible level, knowing that we need to keep our system equitable and schools having the same kinds of approaches and processes, but where individual school or departmental decisions don't upset a balance in terms of equity across the district, I would like to see staff have that autonomy.
Time.
Thank you. I asked board members, incumbents, to give themselves a grade. So Ms. Sawyer, what grade would you give yourself as a school board member as it relates to educating Black and brown students? What grade would you give yourself? Oh, you're muted.
I would give myself a B. I think we are poised to make real progress. The last couple of years have been incredibly difficult. The district has been asked to change course repeatedly because of health concerns, either by decisions of the governor, by the CDC, by the local health department, or our own decisions based on local conditions. And so we are in a recovery mode. And I am ready to take on that task, and I've already proven my commitment to the student outcomes focused governance, which have done hours and hours of training and do hours and hours of homework before board meetings, so that I am prepared to really dive deep into the data and do the progress monitoring that's required.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Witherspoon, just one letter grade. What grade would you give the school board for its work on educating Black and brown students?
A C.
C. Ms. Sneed, what grade would you give the school board when it comes to educating Black and brown students?
I would have to give it the grade that is equivalent to the percentage of Black and brown students that are not proficient in reading. And I believe that's closer to a D than anything.
Okay.
That should be the barometer.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. We will now begin with our 90-second closing statement, and we will begin with Ms. Sneed. Your 90 seconds starts now. Thank you.
My name is Stephanie Sneed. I'm your candidate for District 4 School Board. It is time for a fresh perspective. And I will end as I begin every time I talk to the school board and the public that we are in a state of emergency. We have to have a fresh perspective that's going to deal with an aggressively student achievement, support for teachers and staff, accountability and transparency, as well as collaboration with our intergovernmental agencies, the community, and business partners. District 4 is the lowest performing student, it has the lowest performance of all the districts. It has fallen by 37%, and 65% of the schools in the district are rated D or F. It is time for a fresh perspective. I'm your candidate. My name is Stephanie Sneed, District 4 School Board.
Thank you. Ms. Witherspoon.
I am, of course, Clara Kennedy Witherspoon. I am your candidate for District 4. And the reason that I am is because you need someone who knows what it looks like inside of a school building. You need someone who has had the experience working and building a framework and knowing what a framework needs to look like. You need someone who understands intervention, social, emotional needs of children, and how to address the whole child. It is time for a change, but it's time for a change to put people in those positions who understands what it looks like inside of a school building. If you've never been inside of a school building and you've never done the work, I don't think you're the best fit. Clara Kennedy Witherspoon is the best fit for the position. Thank you.
Ms. Sawyer.
Thank you. I'm Carol Sawyer, and I ask for your support in my reelection. I've been a strong voice in District 4 on the board. I've reached out to the very diverse communities in D4, building relationships with the Latinx, Bosnian, Ethiopian, Nepali, and other immigrant and refugee communities. I respond to constituent concerns and questions promptly and with care. My policy work invited public accountability to make CMS more equitable by creating clear policies and listening to feedback from community members. In crafting the equity policy, I consulted with education advocacy groups like the Black Political Caucus Education Committee, Charlotte-Mecklenburg Association of Educators, and others. I have promoted and defended honest curriculum that reflects the lived experience and history of our students. I have responded to our teacher staffing shortage by treating educators and staff with respect, advocating for appropriate supports and fair compensation, in contrast to those who encourage defunding public schools by our county. I ask for your vote for Carol Sawyer, Charlotte-Mecklenburg, Board of Education, District 4. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sawyer. Thank you, Ms. Sneed, and thank you, Ms. Witherspoon. These are your candidates for District 4. We will take a break and we will come back with District 5 candidates. Thank you so much. Thank you.
this time we will go ahead and turn it back over to our moderator and begin the District 5 forum at this time.
All right, then. Thank you so much. For District 5, we have Lisa Klein and Trent Merchant. We were going to start with Ms. Klein. Your 2-minute opening statement starts now. Good evening, Ms. Klein.
Good evening, Mr. Russell, and thank you for hosting this, and thank you to everyone for having me on. I am Lisa Klein. I am running for District 5 School Board. I am a 39-year experienced educator. 29 plus of those were spent in CMS. I was a teacher, a curriculum developer, and an administrator. But most importantly, I was a parent of CMS students for 15 years. During that time, even though I was an employee, I served on the PTA boards of my children's elementary, middle, and high school. So I have seen CMS not only as a school employee, but as a parent. In 2019, I retired, but became involved in the community when they wanted to build a high school right in my backyard, which was not a good place for a truly comprehensive high school. It was the old Providence Park. Together as part of the community, we found a better location that would allow a comprehensive high school on bigger acreage. So I have seen everything that's happened. During the pandemic, I taught HOTS. So I remember now what it was like to be a teacher. I am dedicated and see my role as a board member as a service to our children, our parents, and our teachers.
Thank you, Ms. Klein. Good evening, Mr. Merchant.
Hey, Dedrick, good to see you. Hi, everyone. I'm Trent Merchant. I hope my name sounds familiar. I was a board member in CMS from 2006 to 2011. I joined a broken board in 2006, and 5 years later, we won the Broad Prize, which was based on the most outstanding overall gains in student achievement and closing achievement gaps among students in poverty and students of color. The leadership team from that era produced 21 future public school superintendents. So, you know, it was an era that started broken, and then when I left, it was functioning very, very well. I am a former teacher. I am a former corporate executive. I led a division in a Fortune 500 company. I'm a CMS dad since 2007, and I will be until 2026. I am an executive search consultant. And if you don't know what that means, I work with organizations to help them find senior leadership talent. That's one of the reasons that I'm coming back to the board, is to make sure that we hire the right superintendent and that we also build a strong leadership team. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Test scores. Black students, 36.6% proficient, 20.7% college and career ready. Latino students, 36.6 proficient, 21.9 college and career ready. 45% of CMS schools, D or an F. Mr. Merchant, when you hear those scores, what goes through your mind?
Well, they stink, right? I mean, we get that, you know, but I think we focused so much on the problem. We've got to focus on solutions. And, you know, what we had some success with when I was on the board was putting the best principals in the schools that needed the most help. You know, we've got a laundry list of programs, but none of it matters unless we have the right leaders in these schools. The right leaders are going to be the ones who recruit the best teachers. They're going to mentor and coach teachers effectively. And they're, most importantly, they're going to instill healthy cultures that build partnerships and focus on driving success for students and supporting teachers. So it's not all about more programs, more of this. It's leadership and culture.
Ms. Klein, what goes through your mind when I went and rattled off those test scores?
Well, I remember being at West Meck and being one of those 4 high schools that Judge Manning wanted to close. I do agree with Mr. Merchant when he says putting good leadership, but it's more than that. It's allowing teachers and the schools to become creative in how they tackle the learning loss and paying the teachers. There were extra finances attached to each of those schools. Teachers were paid extra monies and rewarded for achieving. Every teacher got a $10,000 base on their next year's salary if they achieved those scores. You had to have some type of carrot extended, but that was just part of it. It was the allowing the creativity that has been taken away from teachers. The teachers came together. We worked long hours, 18-hour days, making sure that students could teach and learn.
And sticking with teachers, we need recruitment and retention. What needs to happen to recruit effective teachers and retain effective teachers? What is not happening to make that happen? Start with you, Ms. Klein.
I think it's the pay. CMS is one of the largest districts in the state. We need to build the relationship and institute policies where we put back master's pay, reward those teachers for masters. We need to get out there and start recruiting and make it beneficial for teachers to come here. Yes, we have Teach for America. We have policies where we're bringing teachers in, but it has to be that a teacher's not working 2 side jobs. It's really sad that I walked into a store and I saw one of my old counselors working there. And she says, Ms. Klein, I'm having to work a second job. And she was an experienced school counselor of 20 years just to make her bills each month. So we have to pay better if we want to recruit the best. At one time we had that policy. I don't see it anymore. And we don't support the teachers. So
thank you. Mr. Merchant, what say you?
So compensation is certainly important. One of the reasons that in fact, the main reason that I left teaching was that my wife was pregnant with our second child. We lived in Atlanta. I did the math and went, wow, after taxes, my salary is going to pay daycare for 2 kids. The other reason, though, was that I had so many additional duties, side duties, administrative work, and so forth. I think we've got to find ways to support teachers. We're never going to volunteer our way out of anything, but if we can take some of that side work off of them so that they can focus on teaching, I think we're going to help ourselves. We have to have teachers' backs. I agree with Lisa. Teachers need to have the room to be creative, but if they don't think their principal or the board or senior leadership is going to have their back, then they're going to teach by the book. That micromanagement is not going to get us out of the hole that we're in. I think we've got other opportunities to do other things to provide resources for teachers, housing, some other things that we can do.
Thank you. We're going to stay with funding. The North Carolina legislature has, some would say, has been an obstacle to quality education for all North Carolina children, from a failure to fully fund public schools to an campaign to end public education. So what is your plan to overcome this major impediment to quality public education for all North Carolina children? How can we all get along and get the money that we need in order to educate every child in North Carolina? We'll start with you, Mr. Merchant.
Well, more of the same is not going to get results. I would love to say, oh, we're going to advocate, we're going to go and we're going to rally and we're going to talk to our legislatures. You know what? It's not, it hasn't worked, and more of the same would be insanity. So what I think we need to do is play the cards that we've been dealt to start. And we need to get some wins. We need to demonstrate some competence in CMS. A lot of that, again, is about leadership. It's about making sure that we get the right superintendent. It's about making sure we get the right principals. The board has to absolutely focus on raising the bar and closing the gap in terms of student achievement. And then once we get some of those wins, then we can go to the state. Then we can go to our business community and get them on board as allies. And we can advocate from a position of affirmation rather than a weaker position of protest.
Thank you. Ms. Klein, what do you have to say?
Believe it or not, I agree with Trent on some of that. Mecklenburg has always, if you've been around a long time, and some of you have, was the great state of Mecklenburg with the rest of the state. We have to lead and we have to get those wins. It may be that we clean house and look at who we've got as leaders within the schools and into the senior staff so that we can dig into what is needed to improve education. We can't do that unless we do improve and close the gap. We've been given a certain amount of money. We have to make it work, but we have to look at what we're spending the money on at this time, and we're not spending it correctly.
Accountability. How should the school board be accountable if they cannot close the achievement gap? The goal is 50% of third graders to read on grade level by 2024. If that goal is not met, how should board members be accountable for setting that goal that was not met? Ms. Klein.
Well, we hold our teachers accountable. We hold our principals accountable. We hold our area superintendents and community superintendents. We need to be held accountable as well. Right now, it's an election year. Right now, the public can hold the current board accountable for the current scores. As we go into the next years, if we do not meet these scores, we have to be held accountable. We shouldn't be reelected. This is the opportunity for the community to have input. If we are holding other people accountable, we too need to be held to the same standards as our teachers, administrators, and the superintendents.
Thank you. Mr. Merchant, how do school board members be held accountable if those test scores don't go up?
I mean, it's elections, right? I mean, that's why we have them. And, so it's a beautiful thing, especially at the local level and especially with district representation. People have, an opportunity to select their leaders. Earlier in my life, I was an actor. And one of the things that we used to say was that an audience gets the show that it deserves. I think at the local level, people get the leaders that they deserve. If people don't pay attention, then we're going to get bad leaders. I mean, I don't know how to say it other than that. I think that the board has to absolutely have laser-like focus on raising the bar and closing the gap, and the community needs to be supportive, but also hold the board accountable for doing the same.
That's right. In your mind, beyond test scores, what does a successful school district that's majority minority, what does that look like? In your mind, beyond test scores, what does a successful school district look like? We'll start with you, Mr. Merchant.
Yeah, I'm going to punt a little bit, Dedrick, because I don't know that it matters that it's majority minority. I think the measures are the same. We've got to have a situation. We've got to have a culture where we are maximizing student achievement. Again, I'm beating the same drum: raise the bar, close the gap. I think we've got to have safe schools. I think that we have to celebrate achievement, whether doesn't matter where it comes from. And besides celebrating wins, when we have problems, we've got to solve those problems. I think so often we get caught in complaining. Complaining is so lazy. I mean, it's a great first step. Okay, we recognize there's a problem. We're mad about it, but what are we going to do about it? And that's why my campaign is all about focusing on driving solutions that are sustainable.
Yeah, Ms. Klein, beyond test scores, because I guess there are other ways that you can measure success beyond test scores. And I know you know this as a teacher, but beyond test scores, what does a successful school district look like?
I would believe that a successful school district would show that every child is prepared post high school for college or a career, because not every child's going to college, but that they can be independent adults. And any child who does plan to go to college, they're not competing with each other in CMS. They are competing with students across the state, across the country, and across the world. And again, those students who are vocationally aptitude, they are able to compete with other business people. We want every child to be happy. So my dream would be that every child who leaves CMS is a competent, self-sustaining adult who can contribute to a society. That's been my dream as an educator for 40 years.
Gotcha. This is a question from the audience. To truly see the climate of the schools that you serve or will serve in your district, how likely are you to make a pop-up visit and engage to see what is happening? We'll start with you, Mr. Merchant.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely intend to be visible. You know, you have to be careful as a board member. I think pop-up visits can be helpful. But if you're only relying on that, then you're not getting all of the information. We have some county commissioners who will brag that they never read reports, that they're out in the community. Well, you have to do both. You really do. I do think pop-up visits are good because it makes sure that you don't get the let's put on a show for the board member. Because that's not what I want. I want to see, hey, what's going on? I don't need you to impress me. I want to see what's really going on. Where do you need help in your school, in your community? And let's have honest dialogue. I'm not there to judge you at that point. I'm there to see how I can help you.
Ms. Klein.
Well, I'm retired, so I'm giving my full time and focus to the school system. I already am part of a volunteer group that goes into schools and helps, not in District 5, but in other districts. So I want to be there not as a gotcha, but as how can I help you? What can I do? Is it reading with a small group? Is it bringing a tray of cookies to some teachers who just needed it? Again, this is my calling, is to help, and my calling with the children. It may be doing a crossing guard. I see it constantly in my neighborhood where the traffic's backed up. How can I help? I am a servant to the board and to the community. So yes, you would see me.
All right, thank you. In an article with WFAE, they talked about interim superintendent Hadaball, how he said that improving attendance is one key to helping children learn to read. He said social workers will contact families and offer support to encourage them. And then he said that there will also be state mandated warning letters sent as students approach 10 absences. And in the article, he quotes, and after that, we'll follow the state statutes and we'll be addressing it to the district attorney's office. So, in other words, do you think that kids who are chronically absent, do you think their parents should face criminal charges if they miss school? We'll start with you, Ms. Klein.
Absolutely. I worked at a middle school 25 years ago, and a young lady missed 48 days, and they took her mother to court, and she came in screaming, not the mother, the girl came in screaming at us, how dare you take my mom to court? That was after the 6-day letter. That was after the 10-day letter, 48 absences. So yes, we need to hold the children and the parents accountable. Today was a half day in CMS. I was driving down Providence Road. I saw 4 young men walking down the street, and they were teenagers and younger. And that was at 10 a.m. School was in session, but they weren't. So we have to get the children in school to learn. And we have to help the parents get the children to school. Sometimes the parents are at work by the time they're on that bus. We have to help them. We have to build that community.
Thank you. You have to say about that, Mr. Merchant?
I get it, right? I mean, I think we do need to emphasize attendance. It's very important. You're not going to learn if you're not there, right? I would rather not be heavy-handed, right? My assumption is that if a child is chronically absent, there's something going on in that family. There's some sort of problem. So I don't want to create another problem by holding, bringing charges against a parent. First, I want to have an open hand before I have a closed fist. And I'm going to see how can we help these folks. And that's what's missing right now in Charlotte. COVID didn't create it, but it highlighted what was already happening. We've become so transactional. What built Charlotte were close relationships. We have the resources and the capability to get back to that. That's the avenue that I would prefer.
Okay, thank you. Student achievement is key. So what is not happening that needs to happen? I've been covering education for a very long time, and this achievement gap is nothing new. What needs to happen in CMS that is not happening in order to fix this problem? We'll start with you, Mr. Merchant.
Yeah, so this is not the sexiest answer in the world, but it's an honest one. What I have noticed from the board is, again, that there's any number of programs, and we throw programs, we throw dollars, we throw resources at things, but if I threw some seeds and some wooden stakes and some wire out on the ground, that would not give me a garden, right? I have to cultivate. I have to create a culture in which those plants can grow. And I think that's what's missing in CMS right now. And it goes back to leadership. The only way that we're going, and look, we can get some quick wins, we can get some quick hits, but the only way that this is going to take and be sustainable is through leadership and creating a culture that supports kids, that supports teachers, gets the whole community on the same page.
Yeah, and you think that culture is not happening right now in CMS?
Do you? No, it's not. I mean,
okay.
Clearly it's not. If you have teachers who are, and I hope you'll give Lisa the same time you're giving me, when you have very high turnover with teachers, when you have a revolving door at superintendent, we haven't even talked about the lack of leadership in tiers 2, 3, and 4 on the senior leadership team. It's going to take a while, right? It's not going to be immediate, but it's going to start by nailing this superintendent hire, and by getting some really good board members.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Klein.
Repeat the question just a little bit because we went a little bit off.
Yeah, just want to know that what is not happening in CMS that needs to happen in order to close this achievement gap. This achievement gap is nothing new. It's been around for years. You've been in the classroom. So tell me, as a board member, if elected, what will you say needs to happen in CMS that's not happening in order to close this achievement gap?
I've been in the classroom. We need to clean house. We have been doing things wrong for a few years. Trent mentioned 2011. Our school system has spiraled. We had some great leaders. We had wonderful people who surrounded themselves with people stronger than them. Our teachers have no respect for people who are above them because we don't respect the teachers. We're not letting teachers do what they do best. We've become prescriptive learning. A principal once said, I want to hear what you're saying in one class and the next class. That's not what we need. We need teachers who are allowed to be creative, to find what they need, not being told you will teach this on this day because you have a test at the end of the quarter. Here's what your end result is. You do what you need to do to get there, and we're not seeing it. We have leaders who have less than 7 years in the classroom. You tell a 20-year experienced teacher that that person has more understanding of what's in the classroom? No. Right now, our school system is bleeding. We have to clean it up. We have to start at the ground zero and work our way back up and gain the respect and the confidence of the community. We don't have that right now. We have to garner community support. If we get the community support, we get the money that's needed and the trust will, and the teachers, we can rebuild it. I want to see a total change.
Gotcha. And speaking of change, if elected, not only will you be hiring a new superintendent, but in December, you will be choosing board leadership, chair and vice chair. Talk to me about how do you stand with the leadership of the board? We'll start with you, Mr. Merchant.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're going to have to see who wins, right? So much is always made of the vice chair election, and it's really kind of a nothing burger. But so I'm not worried about that one. The chair, we'll see how that goes. The job that I want to do is I want to lead the search committee for the new superintendent. Because I've managed outside search counsel before as the head of talent at a $5 billion company. I am an executive search consultant, so I know what good looks like. So, that would be my interest, but I want to wait and see who wins.
Ms. Klein.
Well, current leadership isn't working right now. They are leading a broken board. So depending on who is elected to these positions, I would want to see someone who can bring the new people on the board and can make it a functioning board where we can back the new superintendent. Because right now they're not even working within themselves. There's a lot of division, and a lot of it is they've put their own personal beliefs ahead of what's best for the children.
Thank you. Thank you for this discussion. We will now start your 90-second closing remarks, and we will start with Mr. Merchant.
Sure. So, it's a really interesting time in our community. And I will tell you that the first year for a board member is very difficult. One of the advantages that I would have coming to this position is that I've done it before. I've made the mistakes. I know the landmines. I know how all of this operates. When I was on the board from 2006 to 2011, it was characterized by stability, strong leadership, and phenomenal gains in student achievement and closing achievement gaps, despite having to navigate the Great Recession and make massive budget cuts. I'm an executive search consultant who's going to make sure that we get the right leader as the new superintendent. I'm a CMS parent and will be for another 4 years. And I'm doing this because I believe that with the resources that we have in our community, we can make CMS a talent development factory that does right by kids, drives our local economy, and makes Charlotte an even better place to live than it already is.
Thank you. Ms. Klein.
At the end of this year, when Ruby Jones leaves the board through retirement, there's only one person on the board who will have had 30 years of experience, and that's Lenora Shipp. I would ask that you look for other experienced educators to be a part of the new voice for CMS. That is me. I have 39 plus years of experience. I've been on all aspects in CMS and other states. I've seen it when it was at the best. I have that schoolhouse voice and experience that can make the systemic changes. I'm not just about the superintendent and selecting that person. That's just one aspect. I'm all about the children and the parents and rebuilding trust within the community that has been broken. And I ask for your vote in November, because I will be your voice and the bridge between the community and the schools. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Klein. Thank you, Mr. Merchant. Those are your candidates for District 5. Thank you so much. We'll take a quick break and we'll come back with our final candidates for District 6. All right, thank you. Now we have our District 6 candidates, Mr. Sean Strain, Summer Nunn, and Michael Watson. You will now begin your 2-minute opening statement, and we will begin with the incumbent, Sean Strain. Good evening, Mr. Strain.
Good evening, Dedrick, and thanks for hosting and moderating this important session. As Dedrick said, I'm Sean Strain. I'm a CMS parent, a school improvement team member, and now have been serving on the board for 5 years. Our system exists to prepare and educate our youth to be competitive, contributing members of our community. Unfortunately, our leadership has failed to rise to the needs and expectations of our youth. As a direct result, our district has as well. CMS is over a $2 billion enterprise delivering critical educational services to over 140,000 students in our community. The board functions as its board of directors and owns the results delivered based on the direction and culture it has set. High-performing organizations require focused leadership committed to its mission, demonstrating deliberative, critical thought, and a strong culture of accountability. I have been honored to serve and have consistently demonstrated and embodied these leadership characteristics and ask for your support to help lead the cultural transformation necessary to deliver strong student outcomes across District 6 and the entire county for every student in every school, every day. For that is why the district exists, those we serve, and the board's role in serving them. Thank you.
We will now hear from Ms. Nunn.
Thank you, Deidre. Hi, everyone. My name is Summer Nunn, and thank you for having me this evening. I am a mom of two, so I am an elementary school mom. I have one in kindergarten and one in fourth grade. And currently, we actually have no representation of elementary parents on the board. And given what has happened over the past few years, I can tell you as elementary parents, we are very frustrated with where CMS is, not only for our kids, but all the kids in the county. By day, I am actually a corporate level business executive. And when we look at CMS, it is a large organization. It's 180 schools, almost 20,000 in staff, serving 140,000 students. We need strong leadership, not only on the board, but also in how we hire our next superintendent. We have a leadership problem. It starts with the board. And I am here to bring my experience as a business leader. I have served in 3 C-suite roles at this point. So I'm the chief marketing officer. By day, I have worked to build and transform organizations, which is why we need to have the right leadership on the board with that experience to take us to the next level. It can't just be about goals. It's got to be about impact and actually having a plan to turn things around. The other thing that we have to make sure that we are doing is allocating and securing funding properly. That is one of the major roles of the board. And as we look at student outcomes and achievement gaps, we obviously need to think about our allocation and reallocation of things. And then the last reason that I'm running for school board, as not only as a corporate executive, but also as a marketing expert, we are not listening when connecting with our community as much as we need to. If you talk to the community, they know the things that are wrong and they have visions that we are not necessarily see happening in our community. So I'm here not only to make sure that it is communicating, but we do it within the schools too.
Thank you. Mr. Watson.
Good evening, audience. My name is Michael Watson. I am running for Board of Education District 6. I just want to say, just to start this off, I believe in the public education system. I am a product of the public education system. In the daytime, I'm an IT executive and a small business owner, but also I'm a husband and a father of 2 CMS students. I've dedicated the past 7 years to serving CMS in various ways. I've been the vice president of a PTA at the elementary level, as well as a school leadership team member at that level for 3 years. I served as the president of a PTA at the middle school level, as well as 3 years as an SLT member on that team as well. And I currently serve at the high school level at Ardrey High School. At the collegiate level, I serve on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Board for the College of Engineering at the University of Missouri. I am a huge believer in data-driven analysis. I believe that we need a fresh perspective on looking at the data and understanding real solutions, but I'm also highly focused on creative solutions. If you understand anything about the way our state is structured as a Dillon state, then you know that there are some hurdles that we have to overcome before we can actually do things that we want to do. So that's why I say we need to be creative about solutions, but at the end of the day, it's all about increasing student outcomes. Thank you.
Yeah, and in talking about student outcomes, we know the test scores. Black students, 36.6% proficient, 20.7% college and career ready. Latino students, 36.6% proficient, 21.9% college and career ready. Tell me, why are those scores like that and what needs to change? We're going to start with Ms. Nunn.
Yeah, so it goes back honestly to leadership. And that starts at the board and making sure that we're not only focused on the right goals and that we have goals that are comprehensive enough, which I feel like they could be more comprehensive rather than huge milestones throughout a child's career. But it also goes back to what that superintendent is doing and the plans they are creating. And I say this as someone who sits on the student improvement team, which was also known as the parent leadership team. And over the past few years, we're just given goals with very little guidance on what to do, no additional resources. So it's like, here, hit these goals without a plan. And that starts with the leadership. And that's not only the superintendent, but his next level down and all the area superintendents actually having strategies and plans and working with the individual school leadership to create these plans, and also allocating resources where they're needed too. So for now, we've got to not just be focused on goals and the superintendent. We actually got to find a superintendent who knows how to not only take those goals and have comprehensive goals, create plans.
Thank you. Mr. Watson.
Yeah, I think so. You know, we spend a lot of time looking at the outcomes and the results, and we have justifiable outrage at those numbers. But I think we really need to do is take a step back and inspect what we are expecting at those schools. We need to make sure that the systems and the curriculum that we have in place support the various student groups that have to reach those outcomes. I would argue that, we shouldn't take a one-size-fits-all approach to CMS. There are schools that have, different strategic staffing needs that may be, leading to the outcomes of those schools. But again, it's all about understanding where the data drives us. I think, I know the data is available, but I don't know that we're looking at it in the right way to find real root cause analysis.
And Mr. Strain.
Yeah, Dedrick, you'll hear the word leadership mentioned in just about every response, because it's been a colossal failure of leadership. Not just because we didn't have sufficient goals, but because we didn't hold people to account. Between the ages of 7 and 16, every one of us that sit on this call as parents are required to have our kids in school. We didn't require kids to be in school. And I'm not talking about COVID. I'm talking about we didn't even require kids to come to school or to show up for class. And when they do, it doesn't matter how they perform. We give them, a 50 for putting their name on a piece of paper. So the effort and performance no longer matters. That is a colossal failure of leadership when you lower all of the expectations and expect somehow, some way to come up with good results. That is never going to happen. That's been an issue on the board. It's been an issue with the previous district's leadership that we released.
Thank you. This is a question from the crowd, the audience. Do you feel the North Carolina General Assembly should honor the appellate court Judge Lee's 2020 order in the 28-year-long Leandro court case to fully fund North Carolina public schools? If so, what will you do as a CMS school board member to advocate for this outcome? We're going to start that with Mr. Watson.
Yeah, so the answer to the question, yes, I do feel the General Assembly should do what it's been told to do. Do I think it'll happen? I'm not sure. We can continue to lobby and to push for those funds to be released, but in the interim, we have to find a way to be creative. So if you think about what that means, I think you have to look at community support and not just families. This includes our business community. If we have financial shortfalls, we have to partner with our community to make sure that we have the proper funding. And there are creative ways to do that, but I think it's important that the General Assembly uphold its obligations. Yes, thank you.
Mr. Strain.
Yeah, thanks, Dedrick. Look, I welcome the increased funding in our public schools, but that said, CMS is not short of resources. It's short of leadership. Every single answer leads back there, right? It's short of leadership that's driving a culture of high expectations, transparency, and accountability within all of our stakeholders, the students, the families, the community partners, CMS staff, and our own board. But yes, I would welcome the additional investment in our students' futures and certainly our staff as well.
And Ms. Nunn.
The best investment we can make is the investment in our future as a state. So Leander has been around since I was in public school in Richmond County, North Carolina, and then at UNC Chapel Hill. So I'm a product of public school. I think what we're going to have to do, besides lobbying the Mecklenburg legislation, which is in our corner, is actually create outreach to other communities. But on top of that, I think CMS can start to do things and show if we have increased investments and do that through corporate sponsorship. So reach into the corporate sponsors arena, which I have a Rolodex I can call, and prove that with further investment, we can have higher outcomes, and then present the case to the state and make sure that we have media surrounded it. We kind of start to force their hand. So I think we have to get a little creative. We kind of have to show them that putting your money in our kids is the best investment we can make for our state. And right now we're 49th. If you look at how big our economy is and how we invest in individual pupils, which just is not okay.
Yeah. In order to improve academic achievement, we need good principals and we need good teachers. We are lacking when it comes to recruiting and retaining teachers. Tell me, what is your big idea to make sure that we turn that around to get good, effective leaders in our classrooms? We'll start with you, Mr. Strain.
Yeah, it's a very significant issue. Over the last 5 years, our pipeline has been relatively anemic, particularly our leadership pipeline, but not limited to just our leaders as well. And so, you know, whilst I'm a corporate executive, I'm not an HR executive. And so I turn as a board member to our HR executive, to our chief HR officer, and ask those questions. What are we doing to enhance the pipeline? What do you need in order to enhance the pipeline? And what I get back is, Sean, you need to understand not only the recruitment challenges, but also our churn, the fact that people are leaving the district. And when you look at the reasons people are leaving the district, a lot of it has to do with culture. People are leaving to go to adjacent counties and take pay cuts to work in adjacent counties. So we need to focus on retaining our talent just as much as we do on increasing our pipeline.
Ms. Nunn.
Yeah, so I mean, one, they need a livable wage. Charlotte has become increasingly more expensive to live in, so that's table stakes. But I can tell you as a corporate executive that you can get paid a lot or you can get paid less, and you will still stay in a job if you feel like you're valued and you feel like it satisfies your purpose in life. And it will go back to, we need to have the right leader in place when it comes to the superintendent, and that person has to be very good at putting the right leadership structure in place where our teachers and staff and bus drivers not only feel valued but feel heard and seen. People go to work where places that they feel valued and they are happy. And right now, the community has somewhat turned against CMS, and there's a negative connotation of what CMS is, and no one wants to work for a place that people think negatively about. So that starts with the board, that starts with the superintendent. We have to turn CMS back around into a place where people want to work. We have amazing teachers that have stuck with us, and we may lose them too if we don't turn that around quickly.
Mr. Watson.
Yeah, so recruitment and retention is a major platform of my campaign. And what I'll say is this: I think in any job, it's not purely a financial issue. I think one thing that we aren't doing a good job of is listening to our teachers and supporting them the way they need to be supported. And to be very transparent, there are schools that have, you know, pipelines of teachers that want to be at those schools. So, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Let's do some modeling. Let's ask the administrators at those schools, what is going on here that you have teachers that want to be at your school? We're so broken in our communication stream. Some of the problems can be solved in-house. So that's my thing. We need to just find out what's going on.
Thank you. What are specifically the top 3 issues facing your school district that, if elected, you will tackle and try to turn it around? What specifically are the top 3 issues facing your district that needs to be addressed? We will start with you, Ms. Nunn.
Yeah, so number one is student outcomes. And I say this talking to a lot of parents, and especially the parent as an elementary school kids, like the outcomes are just not where they need to be. And the equity gap is even bigger too. So not only did we go backwards, the gap got bigger too, which is never a place you want to be in. So that's kind of the first focus, and making sure that we have the right goals and plans in place to do that. Second, it's making sure we hire the right superintendent and leader. There's a lot of distrust with the community around how things went down, but also just having, as many leaderships as we had. I think it's 7 leadership changes over 10 years. We've got to pick the right person who's going to come in and set CMS back on the right path. And then the last thing that I've heard from everyone is just honestly community outreach and communications. There's a complete lack of communication to the parent. There's a complete lack of communications in the community. And it sees because there's no transparency with what happened with the superintendent. There continues to be overcrowding, and until they are screaming, I'll hear from them. So those are the 3 things for me.
Thank you. Mr. Watson.
Yeah, so I'll give you 3. I have a tie at 1 though. So number 1 for me is superintendent/student outcomes. Superintendent, we can't go anywhere without the proper leadership. This is going to take a huge effort, a very concerted effort to make sure we fill that position properly. In terms of student outcomes, out in my district, what you tend to see is that there are some students who aren't prepared for the rigor of work at our school systems here, that are particularly minority students. And what I think needs to happen is some sort of bridge program to prepare them for the level of education that they may receive at these schools. Second, teacher recruitment and retention. Again, this is big across the entire district. It should be a concerted focus of the board moving forward. And third is collaboration. And that is not just with family. Again, that's with family and our businesses. We could create a real great ecosystem for Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools if we just go out there and make the right alliances. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Strain.
Yeah, first is focus. We have got to focus on our mission, our vision, our values, and our goals. We have got to create a focus around that. And we have fundamentally failed to do so. The second is a culture of high expectations, of transparency and accountability. We cannot be a high-performing organization without it. And we are it amazes me that I have these conversations and almost debates as to whether we are an enterprise. We are absolutely a complex $2 billion enterprise. And the last is just to be a place that you want to be. That's whether you're a student, families choose us. Market share is one of the most important things that we could use to measure whether we're delivering the services to the community that our families need. And we won't talk about it. And so we've got to create a place that you want to be as a student, as a staff member, as a board member, and certainly as a superintendent.
Here's a question from the audience. How will your experience on the school improvement team, school leadership team, PTA, parent, how will all of that inform your work on the school board? How will all of your personal experiences inform you as you work on the school board if you are elected? We'll start with Mr. Watson.
Yeah, I think, for me personally, being a member of the school leadership team is a little bit like having a view behind the curtain of what goes on in your local school. So you're informed of issues that are happening in your school. You are very aware of parenting issues, Title IX situations, things that, the normal public wouldn't be able to see. And you're able to help come to a decision and conclusion along with the leadership of that school. As it relates to PTA, our community and our parents are really our main stakeholder. So it's important to understand where they come from. It's important to understand how to function and how to meet the goals that the parents set at the PTA level and create a pipeline of communication back and forth. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Strain.
I guess the question to me is, how did they? Because I did serve on a school leadership team, now school improvement team, prior to my service on the board. And it was incredibly helpful to understand the opportunities to serve on a local policy board and influence the decisions and direction, the policies within a school, is absolutely informative in terms of understanding how to go about creating policy and the impacts of those policies at the district level. That being said, serving on the board of directors for a $2 billion organization with over 19,000 employees is different than serving on a school improvement team for a school that has 200 staff serving 3,500 students. Those are very different things. That being said, to your point, it is tremendously valuable and informative in terms of the role as a board member.
Ms. Nunn.
So working on the SIT team or parent leadership team honestly inspired me to run to some extent, partially because where we come in as parents alongside the school leadership and teachers, you kind of see what has trickled down from the top. And we could see there was a complete lack of leadership and strategy from above. And there was too much of a reliance on individual school leadership, which is why you end up with so much inequity, because then it goes back to how strong is our leadership at the individual school. So that's where we end up with a lot of inequities. And you also have SIT teams that have strong involvement and they don't, but it really prepared you to understand what our administrations and teachers are dealing with and how important the role of the board and the superintendent building the right team is to the success of all of our schools, because we are such a large organization. And it's part of the reason when that strategy and that leadership isn't right, we continue to have inequity of not only resources, but also outcomes.
Thank you. Thank you. How do you balance what's good for your district with what's best for the school system as it relates to Black and Brown students? How do you balance what's good for your district and what's best for the school system as it relates to Black and Brown students? We're going to start with Mr. Strain.
So I'll say that I was certainly elected by and represent a district. However, I serve across the county. And so for me, it's not really a balance. It is absolutely focused on the district's objectives. And if properly defined, when properly defined, those district objectives represent all of the students, and in fact, every student. And there's a difference there, right? When you talk about every student and serving every student, then you are serving those in your district. And so that's what equity is about, is making sure that you're meeting the needs of the individual students with the opportunities and the resources that they need to be successful. And so I don't see that there's a tremendous difference between the two.
Okay, Ms. Nunn.
Yeah, I will represent the district once we are on the board. The board is actually a collective of one, right? We work together. We have to collaborate together. So while we come from different areas of the county, and we need to understand what's happening in our district and be connected and doing outreach, we need to do that across the board, because together it is a board for CMS that is helping drive student outcomes. That should be our sole focus, is taking the community's visions and values and turning that into student outcomes, no matter socioeconomic status, no matter race, no matter any of that stuff. So while we need to be very connected, because that's where we live, most of us, we need to act on behalf of the large organization and make sure that those visions and values are that of what we're seeing across the entire county.
Thank you. Mr. Watson.
Yeah, so again, it's very true that if you are elected to this role, you represent the district as a whole. But to be very frank, the issues that affect some of the other districts also affect District 6. It's just a smaller microcosm. So it's about having perspective of the same issue, right? There's still reading and math issues in our district. It's just not as a large proportion as other districts. So I have a vested interest in seeing that improves across the board. I understand that, the metrics that support why we got there may be different, but again, it's the same problems that you see throughout the district. They also exist in District 6.
Thank you. We have a question from the audience for Mr. Strain. Throughout your years of service, you have pulled school improvement plans from the consent agenda. Why do you find school improvement plans are so important to the work of a school system and individual schools?
Because the school improvement plan is the plan to improve student outcomes in each of the schools, to deliver on the the mission at the school level. They are absolutely critical. I think when people are seated as a board, then there are times when they're expected to vote on stuff and do so with a rubber stamp. I remember Dr. Jones and I going through every one of our individual schools in districts 3 and 6 between us and sitting down with staff to raise concerns about the individual school improvement plans. I voted against school improvement plans because there was no linkage whatsoever to our overall district goals, which we had defined as a board as being absolutely critical to the district and every student. And so if the school improvement plans are not reflective of our district goals, then there's no way we'll ever deliver on the district goals or for the individual students in the school. And that's why I believe school improvement plans are so critical, and school improvement teams that own them are absolutely critical in that regard.
Talking about accountability, we're going to start with you, Ms. Nunn. How should school board members be held accountable if student achievement and the achievement gap is still there? The goal is for third graders to read on grade level 50% by 2024. How do we hold our school leaders accountable if that goal is not met?
Yeah, I mean, look, a lot of us are running because we're not happy with where school outcomes are. That's it. So elections are obviously the first, but I think it is making sure that we are laser focused on what those goals are and evaluating progress of those goals, not just waiting for the major milestones, but also realizing if something is not working, that we might need to change the goals as well. So that is the role of the board. They need to be very laser focused on understanding, are we looking at the data? Is the data the proper thing that we're looking at that actually leads to student outcomes? And then making adjustments if it's not seen fit. And then there's community feedback. They need to make sure that we're talking to them about what's happening and what's occurring, and we're getting their input as we make these goals. But it is our job to measure and make sure that we are adapting them so we reach the highest student achievements. And then if that doesn't happen, we need to have someone else in the spot, which is why a lot of us are running now, is because we don't feel that's what happened.
Thank you. Mr. Watson, how do we hold our school leaders accountable?
Yeah, in simple terms, elections are the referendum. They are the point of emphasis for if you don't feel the board has fulfilled their goals. I think, again, it's probably the most impactful way to hold them accountable. With that being said, I think we just need a fresh perspective. I try to be positive and think that the board didn't fail because they chose to fail, but I just think the perspective needs to be shifted, and we need to look at doing things a little differently. Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Strain, how do we hold board members accountable if the goals are not met?
At the ballot box, 100%. And so the question before the electorate this year for each of the district representatives is, have those individuals served on this board and made decisions in the best interest of student outcomes, or have they more consistently made decisions and taken actions that negatively impacted our students? That is the question for an educated electorate.
And stand right there. What grade would you give yourself, Mr. Strain, as a school board member, as it relates to educating students and educating our Black and brown students? What grade would you give yourself?
So I would give myself a B, in that I have very consistently maintained a focus on our mission of educating and preparing kids. And I have unfortunately not been able to convince the majority of the board to be focused on that area.
And I'll ask that question, if you could just give me a letter grade, because we're running out of time. Ms. Nunn, what grade would you give the school board for its work when it comes to academic achievement?
D, because that's where the outcomes are right now based on the milestones they've set.
Got you. Mr. Watson?
Yeah, I'll take the D and raise it to an F. I think we failed. We simply failed.
Thank you. This is a question for everybody. Yes or no? Yes or no? One thing local school boards can do to advocate for Leandro being funded is to pass a resolution on your school board. Would you file such a resolution as a CMS school board member? Yes or no? Mr. Strain?
No.
Mr. Watson?
Yes.
Ms. Nunn?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. Well, thank you so much. This is your district 6 candidates, and we're going to start with our 90 seconds closing statement, and we will begin with Mr. Watson.
Thank you again for the opportunity. I will end this where I started it. I am a firm believer in our public education systems. I am a product of that. I see nothing but value in what the public education system brings. I want to return CMS to a school district of choice. We need to do that by collaborating with our community. That includes parenting, that includes our business leaders. We need to focus on outcomes. We need to look at the data and make data-driven analysis and solutions. We need to look at system-focused governance structures so that we can understand how to manage this large enterprise that you keep hearing about, how to manage it effectively. Again, I look forward to your support. My name is Michael Watson, and I am running for Board of Education District 6. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Nunn.
So my name is Summer Nunn, and I hope I have your support in November for District 6. As an elementary school mom, I think it's imperative that we have elementary parents with that perspective on our board. And I'm in this for the long haul. I've got one in kindergarten. So my youngest is just starting out. So I want to start, making changes today because they impact my kids today and tomorrow and the next day. And secondarily, I could never be a teacher. They are God's gifts to the earth, but being a corporate business executive and a marketing expert and CMS being such a large organization, I have the expertise and the experience to come in and help be a change maker on this board. I know how to build teams. I know how to work not only within executive teams, but with different partners and build collaboration and corporate sponsorship and all those things. And that's the role of the board, is really to be and listen to the voice of the community and represent the community, but also make sure that we are running CMS by putting the right leadership in place, by securing the right budgets, by building the best facilities and making sure we secure the funding to do that. And I have that expertise. I would be the highest level business expertise we have on that board. And I am ready to make some of Charlotte's corporations put their money where their mouth is, because 20 years ago, they were investing far more than they are today. And it's time that not only the community steps up and helps our schools, but the corporations who are so successful based on the workers in this community also start to invest in education as well. And I'm ready to hold them to that.
Mr. Strain.
Yes, thank you. So CMS, we've talked about, this is a $2 billion enterprise that requires strong leadership to deliver the student outcomes for the 140,000 students we are honored to serve. Our board of directors must reestablish the high expectations worthy of and necessary for our students, our staff, and our district. I've demonstrated these characteristics, focusing on the CMS mission, vision, values, and goals, working tirelessly to serve consistent with my oath and as a consistent and persistent voice for those we serve and whose futures we hold, our students. I'm Sean Strain, and I ask for your support to continue this work.
Thank you, District 6 candidates, Mr. Strain, Mr. Watson, and Ms. Nunn. Thank you so much. I will now turn this portion of the program over to the president, Mr. B. Coates. Mr. B. Coates.
And good evening again, everyone. And we thank you all for joining our forum this evening. I would like to, of course, thank our districts 4, 5, and 6 candidates. I would also like to thank our moderator, Mr. Dedrick Russell, for moderating not only this evening's forum, but last week's forum as well. And then I would like to thank each and every one of you, both the members of the African American Caucus and members of the Greater Charlotte-Mecklenburg community, for joining us for this educational opportunity. And so for me now, the question always becomes, well, what next? What's next is, of course, our election in November. Early voting starts in October. And then for members of the African American Caucus, we will have our monthly general body meeting next Tuesday via Zoom at 6:30 p.m. More information will be coming out via email about that meeting. And For our candidates, what's next is for you to be on the lookout for further communication from the African American Caucus. And as we conclude, I would just implore everyone, whether you are watching now or will watch archived later, to please be an educated voter. And if you would like to be an educated voter, you can of course always stay in contact with the African American Caucus, and we will be able to help you be an educated voter. Once again, thank you for joining us this evening, and this concludes this evening's forum.